The morning air was thick with anticipation. But I didn't need to wait for the phone call. I already knew what would come next. I watched the reflection of my hands in the kitchen window, fingers trembling as I held the coffee mug. It wasn't just the caffeine. It was the weight of what I'd done, the weight of what I had to do. I let the silence stretch for a few moments before I picked up the phone. The screen lit up with a message from Thad, the last person I ever wanted to hear from. "We need to talk," it said. It wasn't a question. It was a demand. He didn't know yet. I leaned back against the counter, letting the cold granite press into my spine as I typed my response. "No, we don't." The sound of my fingers tapping each letter felt like a deliberate strike, a subtle declaration of war. I hit send, watching the 3 little dots flicker and disappear. He would be furious. But it wasn't enough for me anymore. I didn't just want him angry. I wanted him to understand that everything he had, everything he'd taken, was about to be ripped away. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Corinne. The message was short, desperate. "What have you done?" I didn't answer. There was no point in explaining. They already knew. This wasn't about clarity. It was about finality. I glanced out the window again. At the Ford F-150 parked in the driveway like a symbol of their control over me. That truck had been his. Or so he thought. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was a constant reminder of everything I'd lost. But now, it was going to be his downfall. A simple click. A few words typed into a text. And that truck would be gone. My hand hovered over the phone screen again. This time to call Mike. It felt too easy. Too good. "The truck's gone," I said, as if it was just another errand to run. When Mike confirmed, a strange calmness washed over me. I hadn't even realized how much I'd been holding back until now. But then, just as I was about to lock the door, I heard it. Thad's voice. A bellow from the front yard. He was already here, and I didn't have to wait for him to knock. He was storming up the path, a familiar sight, angry, entitled, as if nothing in this world could touch him. But this time, I was ready. I stepped forward, looking through the glass. My hand found the deadbolt. He would regret every second of this. Every single second. I barely heard the knock at the door. I had been expecting it. My fingers curled around the handle, my palm clammy despite the chill in the air. Thad's voice came next, rising with the storm in his words. "Open up, Adeline. We need to settle this now." I didn't flinch. I didn't even move. The door shook with the force of his fist, but I stood perfectly still, watching the old oak splinter under his rage. "You've crossed a line this time." His voice cracked as if he were trying to convince himself as much as me. The room felt smaller as I turned slowly to face the counter. Briar's art project sat on the edge, untouched, a quiet reminder of everything I had to protect. I could hear Thad still pounding, the sound a constant in the background, but it didn't pierce me the way it used to. "I'm not answering to you anymore," I said, finally meeting his gaze through the small window above the door. The words came out calmly. Too calmly. "I don't think you get it, Adeline," Thad shouted, his voice thick with contempt. "This is my truck. My property. You can't just take it." I crossed my arms, watching him from behind the glass. I could almost see the veins bulging in his neck, the heat in his face. He was losing control. And that, for once, was enough to make me smile. "It's not your truck, Thad," I said slowly, my eyes narrowing. It never was. His jaw clenched, a tremor running through his hands as he reached for the door, twisting the handle with a force that could have cracked glass. He was desperate now. "You think you're in control. You've locked me out. You've cut me off. And you're gonna regret this. I promise you. I let his threats hang in the air, unfurling like smoke. I had spent years dancing to his tune, letting him think he could dictate every move. But now, I could feel the power I had been hiding within me. The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner, I said, my voice steady. Even. You've had your fun. Now, I'm done playing your game. Thad's face twisted with a mixture of disbelief and fury. You really think you can destroy me? He spat, stepping back, his boots scraping against the porch. You've got nothing. Adeline. Nothing. I didn't flinch. The door between us might as well have been 1,000 miles wide. I've got everything I need, I replied softly. And you? You've got nothing left. Not anymore. I heard him inhale sharply, as if the words had struck him harder than anything I could have thrown. There was a long silence, just the soft creak of the wind outside. And then, as if everything that had led up to this moment finally broke loose, I heard him bark out an order. Call your lawyer. Adeline. This isn't over. You'll pay for this. I leaned against the doorframe, eyes closed for just a moment. I already did, I whispered, more to myself than to him. I felt the weight of the truth settle in my chest, solid and cold. When I opened my eyes, he was gone, the sound of his footsteps fading into nothingness, swallowed up by the quiet. I didn't move. Not for a long time. But something in me had shifted, something that made it impossible to go back to who I was before. I sat at the kitchen table, the sharp aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the room. But it didn't calm me the way it usually did. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled up the banking app, the screen flickering in front of me. There it was, my credit card. My American Express. I could still feel the faint hum of adrenaline in my veins as I stared at the small text. I wasn't shaking out of fear. I was shaking out of a realization that the first step had been taken, and there was no turning back now. The moment I hit that lock button, the game had changed. I clicked it. The confirmation flashed across the screen, and for a brief second, the world seemed to still. I looked at the text again. Locked. No more access. I wasn't just taking control of my finances, I was taking control of my life. And when I blocked Thad's ability to access the account, it wasn't just about the money, it was about making sure he couldn't manipulate me anymore. His hands, which had once been so firmly on my life, were now tied. Let's see how long you can last without it, I muttered under my breath, though I knew he wouldn't be able to hold his temper for long. My phone buzzed. Thad again. The text was brief, but the words hit with force. What the hell did you do? Adeline, he wasn't asking. He was demanding. I could already hear the edge in his voice through the words. I didn't bother replying right away. Instead, I clicked over to the fraud department page, letting the weight of the moment settle into my chest. I wasn't just locking him out of my account. I was pulling the rug out from under his feet, piece by piece. I needed a strategy. I couldn't just lock him out and walk away. No, I needed evidence. I needed to prove what he had done, what Corinne had done. I scrolled through my credit report, each item loading like another ticking time bomb. Then it appeared. The hard inquiry. A loan for $12, $500. A personal loan that I didn't know about. Taken out in my name. For an upgrade to a golf club membership. They'd used my identity to make that loan. I gripped the edge of the table, eyes narrowing. I wasn't just dealing with a stolen truck or stolen funds anymore. This was identity theft. I called the fraud department. The phone rang and rang. The hold music, nothing but a tedious loop of soft jazz that did nothing to calm my nerves. But I didn't let the frustration show. I couldn't afford to lose my focus now. My fingers gripped the phone tighter as I waited, staring at the screen. How long is he going to get away with this? I asked myself. As the line finally clicked and a representative answered, my pulse quickened. I need to hear the loan application recording, I said firmly, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. I wasn't just asking for details. I was gathering ammunition. Minutes later, the recording played. Corinne's voice. Smooth, calm, but cold as she recited my social security number without hesitation. Sterling, she said for my mother's maiden name. No stutter. No pause. My hand tightened around the phone as I listened. First pet. Buttons. A tabby cat I had when I was 7. The memory cut like a knife. That feeling of being betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you. Is this your voice on the recording? The agent asked. My throat closed. I couldn't speak for a moment, but I forced the words out. No. It's my mother. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. The silence was deafening. I could hear the wheels turning in the fraud agent's head as the gravity of what had been uncovered began to sink in. When the call ended, I hung up and leaned back in my chair, trying to steady my breath. I wasn't done yet. I wasn't even close. The fraud department would take time, but I didn't need to wait for them to act. I had the evidence. I had the cards in my hand, and the game was about to get a whole lot more interesting. The plan was simple. I had to strip them of everything. Step 1. I needed to prove the fraud and make sure the investigation stuck. I pulled up my banking app again, snapping a screenshot of the locked card for my records. Then, I logged into the Federal Trade Commission's identity theft page, filling out the forms with calm, methodical precision. Every checkbox, every signature line was filled out. Nothing personal. Nothing emotional. Just facts. Just the slow, calculated motion of taking back what was mine. I didn't need to be angry anymore. I had something far more powerful than rage now. Control. And this time, I wasn't afraid to use it. I stood at the counter, my hands steady as I tapped away on my phone. Each click a deliberate, calculated motion. The text I had just sent was simple, but it would hit harder than anything I could say in person. I've filed the police report. The investigation is underway. I wrote. The silence that followed felt suffocating, but I didn't flinch. Thad would have no idea what he was about to walk into. I dropped the phone on the counter and turned to face the door, listening to the familiar rhythm of footsteps growing louder in the distance. They were coming, and I could feel the tension in my muscles as I waited. Thad, with his sense of entitlement, and Corinne, always so sure of her ability to twist the truth. They didn't know I had already made my move. I reached for the manila envelope I had prepared earlier, the weight of it in my hands almost comforting. Inside were the documents I needed, the police report, the fraud affidavit, and the proof that they had stolen from me. The knock came, sharp and insistent. I didn't move. Not at first. I simply stood there, taking a breath. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for. I opened the door slowly, just enough to let their faces fill the frame. Corinne's mascara was smudged, and Thad stood behind her, his face a deep shade of purple. What's this about? Adeline, Thad growled, his voice low but full of venom. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I let my gaze drift over the two of them, my silence speaking louder than any words could. The air between us thickened with the weight of everything that had been left unsaid for years. Finally, I spoke, the words slow, measured. You've had your fun, Thad. Now, it's time to pay the price. His eyes narrowed, and Corinne stepped forward, hands raised in a placating gesture. You don't understand what you're doing. This is a mistake. I didn't blink. No. You're the ones who made a mistake. I'm just fixing it, I said, watching as they both tried to find their footing, their arrogance slowly cracking. The silence stretched again, and for a moment, the only sound in the room was the soft hum of the refrigerator. Thad opened his mouth to argue, but I wasn't waiting for him to speak anymore. I pulled the manila envelope from the counter and held it out, my fingers barely trembling. I've already filed the report. You're not getting away with this. Thad's face contorted in disbelief. You think you can just... He stopped mid-sentence when I placed the envelope in his hands. I didn't need to say anything else. The weight of the documents inside spoke for me. That's not all. I continued, my voice steady as I watched the realization settle in. The loan you took out in my name, the one you used to fund your little golf membership, that's fraud. And I've already contacted the authorities. I let the words hang in the air, their impact lingering like smoke. Thad's grip tightened around the envelope, his eyes flashing with anger. But there was something else there too, fear. For the first time in years, I saw it. You can't do this, he spat, his voice raw. We're family. Adeline. We've done everything for you. I couldn't help the smirk that tugged at my lips. Family doesn't steal from each other. You've done enough for me, Thad. You've shown me exactly who you are. The truth of it was liberating. And now, you'll face the consequences. Corinne's face turned pale. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she had no words. Thad tried to recover, his shoulders stiffening as he puffed out his chest. This isn't over, he warned. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and stared at him. It is over, I said quietly. And you've got 30 days to settle everything, or the charges stick. I watched as his bravado crumbled, piece by piece. He couldn't talk his way out of this. He couldn't buy his way out either. This time, it wasn't up to him. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. I had already won. And Thad, he was just beginning to understand how powerless he really was. The day had finally come. I stood by the window, watching as Thad's rental car screeched up the driveway, gravel flying beneath the tires. The sound loud and jarring in the otherwise quiet morning. My pulse didn't race. There was no panic in my chest. Just a quiet calm. The kind that comes when you know you've already won. I looked down at the manila envelope resting on the counter, its contents neatly arranged, just waiting to be handed over. I opened the door slowly, letting the familiar scent of wet earth and pine drift in from outside, as if to remind me that this was it. The last step. Thad and Corinne stormed up the walkway, their faces twisted with a mix of fury and disbelief. Thad's suit looked wrinkled, as if he'd been driving too fast, the creases of stress deepening in his forehead. Corinne was a step behind him, eyes wide with that same frantic energy, trying to appear calm, but failing. I didn't flinch as they reached the doorstep. What the hell is this? Adeline, Thad demanded, his voice rough, as if he couldn't even believe the words were coming out of his own mouth. We need to fix this. Now. I stood there, unmoving, letting them marinate in the silence for just a moment longer. Thad was trying to assert control, trying to intimidate, but I was no longer the woman who flinched at his demands. Fix it, I asked, voice steady, almost too calm. No, Thad. This time, there's nothing to fix. Corinne's face turned pale, but she stepped forward anyway, her eyes darting nervously to the envelope on the counter. Adeline, you don't understand what you're doing. This is too much. You're making a huge mistake. She put a hand on Thad's arm, trying to calm him, but the tension between them was palpable. He was unraveling, and I could feel it. I didn't answer her. I didn't have to. Instead, I walked past them, slow and deliberate, to the counter where I'd placed the envelope. My fingers brushed lightly against it, savoring the feeling of finally holding all the pieces in place. I turned back to face them, letting the moment sink in before I spoke. The loan you took out under my name. I let the words hang in the air. Fraud. I've filed everything with the authorities. They'll be here soon. Thad's eyes widened, his fists clenched at his sides, his knuckles turning white as if he were about to throw a punch. You can't do this. His voice cracked on the last word, desperation seeping through the cracks. He stepped toward me, but I didn't move. You don't know what you're messing with, he growled, trying to sound threatening. But the fear in his voice was unmistakable. I took a step closer, not flinching, not giving him an inch. I know exactly what I'm messing with. And I'm done letting you destroy everything I've worked for, I said, my words cutting through the air like a blade. The silence that followed felt heavy, thick with the weight of years of betrayal, years of manipulation. Corinne's voice trembled when she finally spoke. You'll regret this. Adeline, you've crossed a line. Her words dripped with venom, but there was a flicker of fear in her eyes. She knew, just like I did, that this time there was no going back. I didn't bother to respond to her. Instead, I reached for the envelope and handed it to Thad. His fingers twitched, but he took it from me, opening it slowly, his breath coming in shallow gasps as he scanned the papers. I watched him, my eyes never leaving his. As the realization of what I had done hit him, his face drained of color, his lips barely moving as he read the police report, the fraud affidavit, the proof of everything they'd stolen. This is over, I said quietly, the finality of it settling between us. You're done, Thad. He stared at the papers, the words blurring in his vision as panic set in. You can't just take everything. His voice was high-pitched now, cracking with fear. I crossed my arms, watching as the weight of my actions settled in. I can. And I already have. The door behind me opened, the unmistakable sound of a tow truck pulling into the driveway. I didn't need to look to know what was happening. I could feel it, the inevitability of it. Thad turned, his face twisting in anger, but the words never came. Instead, he stood there, frozen, watching the truck lift his precious Ford F-150 off the ground, the front wheels lifting higher and higher with each passing second. The sound of the lift echoed through the air, drowning out everything else. I told you, I said softly, my voice a whisper now. You thought you could take from me. Now you'll see what happens when I take back what's mine. Thad opened his mouth to say something, but the words died on his tongue. Instead, he turned and stormed off, his face a mask of defeat and fury, Corinne trailing behind him, her eyes avoiding mine. They had no more fight left. I stood in the doorway, watching them leave, watching the truck disappear down the road. It was over. Finally, I didn't need to say anything else. I'd won. And this time, no one could take it away. The day after everything had settled, I found myself standing in the kitchen. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the only sound in the house. Briar was still asleep, her small breath steady as she slept in her room, oblivious to the storm that had just passed through our lives. I wasn't sure what to feel yet. Part of me felt empty, like I had fought so hard to win. But now that it was over, there was nothing left to conquer. I looked out the window at the empty driveway, the spot where Thad's truck had been just hours ago. It was gone. It felt right that it was gone. My phone buzzed, and for a second, I hesitated. I knew what it would be. A message from Aunt Maura. Her voice had been the one to call earlier, full of that false concern. But this time, it was just a text. "You've gone too far. Adeline. This isn't over." The words were sharp, but there was no fire behind them anymore. No power. They were just words, like all the others I had heard over the years. I couldn't help the small smile that tugged at the corner of my lips. "It's over," I muttered to myself, the reality settling in. I walked to the living room, my steps light but sure. Briar was awake now, sitting at the kitchen table, a book open in front of her. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. "Mom, can we go to the park today?" she asked, her voice bright, full of that untainted joy that I had longed to protect. I nodded, stepping forward to wrap her in my arms, pulling her close. "You bet we can," I whispered, pressing my cheek against her head. For the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. The weight that had been dragging me down for years, that suffocating fear of being controlled, was gone. Thad and Corinne were no longer a threat. They were just echoes now, fading into the past where they belonged. We spent the day at the park, just the two of us, laughing, running, and living without the shadow of betrayal hanging over us. And as the sun began to set, painting the sky with soft hues of orange and pink, I knew that this was where I was meant to be. Finally free. I didn't need anything more. I had everything I needed right here, with me. I had Briar. And that was all that mattered now. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it struck a chord or reminded you of your own battles, share your thoughts below. Your voice matters here. Don't forget to subscribe for more true-to-life stories of justice, strength, and redemption. Until next time, take care of your peace.